All right, welcome in everyone to another deep dive with us. Today we're looking into something that's, I guess you could say, a little bit different than our usual. We've got this YouTube video and then this article, and they're both from, or about, well, the article's from Love Ireland, but they're both about this 62-year-old Irish guy, Shay Bradley, who decided that he wanted to have a little fun at his funeral. And we're going to be looking into that today.
Yeah, it's really fascinating how he sort of turned what's usually, a super serious and sad occasion, and he just flipped it on its head and just made it something completely different using humor. And it just makes you think, is there a better way to say goodbye?
I mean, think about it. You're at a funeral,
Hmm.
everything's really sad and somber, and then they're lowering the coffin down into the ground. And all of a sudden you hear, let me out, it's too dark down here.
And it's not just anyone's voice, it's Shay. He had
Yeah.
this pre-recorded message, set to play like right at that moment. So it sounds like he's, trapped inside the coffin. Can you imagine how people reacted?
I can only imagine. Yeah, what a moment. But actually, we don't have to imagine because the video shows it. People are laughing. Some people, you can tell they've got tears in their eyes. Some people look completely stunned. Nobody expected that.
It seems like that's exactly what he wanted. You know, that Love Ireland article says that his whole goal was to make his funeral a celebration of life, One last chance to make everybody laugh.
It's definitely a different way of doing things. But I think it's important to remember the cultural context here, too. That article really emphasizes how important what they call dry humor is in Irish culture.
Yeah, dry humor. It's all about being subtle, Unexpected wit that just catches you off guard. And a lot of times it's delivered totally deadpan.
So it wasn't just a random prank. It was Shay using this very specific kind of humor that's just a huge part of Irish culture.
And it seems like it really worked. That article talks about how there was this feeling of joy and warmth at the funeral. It's like, even though Shay wasn't there physically, his humor still brought everyone together. They all got to share that moment of laughter and connection.
It really makes you think about the way we do funerals here.
Yeah.
All serious and somber. Are we doing it wrong? Should we be trying to make them a little more lighthearted? Add in a personal touch, even if it means breaking with tradition a little bit?
I think it definitely makes you question the idea of what a proper farewell should look like. And, maybe it'll get people talking about how we can make these goodbyes more personalized and more meaningful, even if that means getting a little mischievous.
Mischievous is a good word for it.
Hmm.
But it does make you wonder, would you want something like that at your own funeral?
It's definitely a bold move. And it brings up some interesting questions, too, like, where's the line between lighthearted and just plain disrespectful? What about people who might be upset by it instead of finding it funny?
Yeah, you're right. Not everyone has the same sense of humor. What one person thinks is hilarious, another person might find totally inappropriate.
And that's where I think this whole idea of personalization comes in. The Love Ireland article mentions that Irish funerals in general tend to be more about celebrating the life, like focusing on the good times, even though it's sad. It's less about being super formal and more about honoring the person in a way that shows who they really were.
So maybe Shay's prank wouldn't work for everyone. But it does show that people are starting to want funerals that are less about just mourning and more about showing the personality and spirit of the person who passed away.
Absolutely. Imagine if funerals were more like, these personalized celebrations with music and stories, even a little bit of humor, all used to, create a picture of the person's life.
That would certainly be memorable. But I guess the most important thing is that whatever you do, it really reflects your wishes and it connects with the people you leave behind.
Yeah, that's the key. And that's what makes this whole thing so interesting. What would your ideal farewell look like? Would you want something traditional and serious? Or would you want it to be more of a celebration with music and laughter? Or would you want to do something totally unique like Shay did?
This is a really good question. One I honestly haven't thought about much before. It's so easy to just go along with what everyone else does that we forget that even in death we can still express ourselves.
Think about it. If you had one last chance to talk to your loved ones at your funeral, what would you say? It really puts things in perspective.
It does.
And it's not just about the words, it's about the feeling you want them to have. Do you want them to remember you with laughter? Or tears? Or just a sense of peace?
It sounds like Shay wanted his family and friends to remember him with smiles, even though he was gone. And from the video, it looks like that's exactly what happened.
It just shows how powerful humor can be even when you're dealing with death. It reminds us that even though we're grieving, we can still find joy and connection and celebrate the life that was lived.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Shay Bradley's unforgettable farewell, What's the main thing we should take away from all this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that there's no right or wrong way to say goodbye. What really matters is that we choose a way that feels true to who we are, that honors what we believe in, and that lets us connect with our loved ones one last time, even if it means doing something a little different.
Maybe we should all spend less time thinking about how funerals are supposed to be
Yeah.
and more time thinking about how we want them to be.
Shay's story reminds us that even in death, we still have choices. We can still create something new and leave behind something that truly reflects our lives.
So as you go about your day today, we'll leave you with this thought. What will your final message be? What kind of legacy do you want to leave? It's something worth thinking about and maybe even talking about with your family and friends. You might be surprised by the stories you hear and the connections you make along the way. Mischievous, yeah, that's one way to put it. But it does make you think, would you want something like that at your own funeral?
It's definitely a bold choice. And it does bring up some interesting questions. Is there a line between keeping it lighthearted and being disrespectful? And what about the people who might be upset by it rather than amused?
That's a good point. Not everyone has the same sense of humor. What one person thinks is hilarious could be offensive to someone else.
Right, and that's where this whole personalization thing comes in. That Love Ireland article mentions that Irish funerals in general are more about celebrating the person's life, even though everyone's sad, of course. It's less about being super formal and more about honoring the person in a way that really reflects who they were as a person.
So Shay's prank might not be everyone's cup of tea, but it does show that more and more people are wanting funerals to be less about mourning and more about showing the personality and spirit of the person who died.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. What if funerals were more like personalized celebrations, with music and stories and even some humor all designed to paint a picture of the person's life?
It would definitely make for a more memorable send-off. But I guess the key is to make sure that whatever you choose, it really reflects your wishes and it resonates with the people you leave behind.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this whole conversation so interesting. What would your ideal farewell look like? Would you want something traditional and somber? Or a lively celebration with music and laughter? Or maybe something completely out of the box, like Shay's prank?
Wow, that is a really thought-provoking question. And honestly, one that I haven't given much thought to. It's so easy to get caught up in the norms and traditions. We forget that even in death, we can still express ourselves.
That's so true. Imagine you have one last chance to speak to your loved ones at your funeral. What would you say? It really makes you think about what's important.
It does.
And it goes beyond just the words. It's about the feeling you want to leave them with. Do you want them to remember you with laughter, with tears, with a sense of peace? What's the feeling?
Well, it seems like Shay definitely wanted his friends and family to remember him with a smile. Even though they were sad he was gone. And judging by the video, I think he accomplished that.
Yeah, it really speaks volumes about the power of humor, even in the face of death. It reminds us that even in grief, there's still room for joy and connection and celebrating the life that was lived.
Shay's story really makes you think, doesn't it?
Hmm.
It's like he's showing us that it's okay to question those old funeral traditions, and really think about how we want people to remember us.
Yeah, it's like he's asking, what kind of story do you want to leave behind? That's a powerful question. And it's not just about planning a funeral. It's about how we live our lives knowing that one day we're going to have to say goodbye.
I never thought about it that way before.
Mm.
But you're right. If you knew you only had one chance to talk to your loved ones, what would you say?
And it's not even just the words, it's the feeling you want to leave them with. Laughter, tears, peace.
Well, Shay definitely wanted his loved ones to remember him with a smile, even though they were sad he was gone. And it seems like from the video, that's exactly what he did.
It just shows you how powerful humor can be, even when you're dealing with death. It reminds us that even in grief, there's still room for joy and connection and,
Yeah.
celebrating the life that was lived.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Shay Bradley's unforgettable farewell, what's the one thing we should take away from all this?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that there's no right way or wrong way to say goodbye. The most important thing is that you choose a way that feels true to you, that honors your values, and lets you connect with your loved ones one last time, even if it's a little unconventional.
Maybe it's time we stop worrying about how funerals are supposed to be and start focusing on how we want them to be.
Shay's story reminds us that even in death, we still have choices. We can still create something unique and leave a legacy that truly reflects our lives.
So as you go about your day, we want you to think about this. What will your final message be? What kind of legacy will you leave behind? It's something worth thinking about, maybe even talk about with your family and friends. And who knows, you might be surprised by the stories you hear and the connections you make. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next